Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our monthly Perspective Roundtable. Today, we're asking why consider business school in Europe? And we have our special guests from ESMT Berlin. I'm your host, Christy Bleisefer of Poets and Quants, and please feel free to use the Q&A function to submit any questions you have for our panelists. I'll do my best to get to those at the end of the session. You can also check the resources tab to find links with a lot more information. So let's take a minute to get to know our panelists. I was talking to them earlier. I just had a chance to visit ESMT Berlin a couple of weeks ago, and it is an exceedingly beautiful campus with a lot of great history. I was very charmed. So I'm excited to be here with both of you today. So Marcel, why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having us. It's great to be in this webinar and also to represent ESMT. Fantastic place. So my name is Marcel Kalis. I'm not German. I moved here a long time ago from Rotterdam, the neighbor of Germany, when ESMT was opening the doors, and I've been there ever since. And what started, as a very small school with executive education and a full-time MBA program is now, well, an established organization and an educational center where we offer now MSc programs, a full-time MBA, an executive MBA, a part-time MBA, global online MBA. And we work in the Career Development Center, which I'm co-directing, I have to say. I started alone, and we're now a team of 6, supporting our students and also maintaining the corporate relations we have with our partners.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining us. Tim, how about you?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Tim McGrath. I'm originally from the US. As the accent might give away, I'm from Tennessee originally. I studied though in Ohio, then lived in Washington, D.C., and then found my way to Berlin 3.5 years ago, actually in pursuit of the MBA at ESMT Berlin. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that. My background though was actually more clinical. I worked in hospitals as an occupational therapist for about 10 years and manager there. Now I work in kind of the pharma industry, working at a company called Clarinus as a senior project management, actually transitioning to a new role as a project director overseeing a team of project managers about a month. So yeah, I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, great. Fascinating. I'm excited to hear about more about why you kind of chose the Great Migration, actually. So thank you both for joining us. And Marcel, we'll kind of just start with you. Tell us a little bit more about what makes ESMT and more broadly European business schools unique compared to, programs in the US or perhaps Asia.
Yeah, maybe let's start with the broader question. I think the big difference is the length of the program. I would say that most of the European programs are 1 year, 13 months, 14 months. ESMT is 15 months. We started as a 1-year program, and we prolonged it now with summer options, which I can mention also later. Second, I think a big difference are the costs and the return on investment. I think the European programs are much cheaper than in the US or maybe in Asia. And yeah, I mean, Europe, a big exposure, of course, to many different countries and cultures, where you have, I think, as an MBA candidate, a lot of opportunities. And regarding to ESMT, we were originally founded by 25 multinationals. That is a long time ago, but the companies are still in golden letters on our walls. And with some of them, we have a very good relationship. And it's not only about student recruitment, what makes us very special, but also about executive education, keep educating the managers working for those organizations, coming back to ESMT and do executive education. But also those companies, they still sponsor us with scholarships, very important, and also with projects for students in our MBA and MSc programs. Plus the location Berlin. I don't know about you, Tim, but it's a fancy place. It's a mix of so many cultures and nationalities and companies and organizations. There is a lot of investment in innovation and startups, and many of those startups became scale-ups very successful, and made Berlin also a different place over the last 15 years, I would say. And it's actually great to be a part of that. Plus, for many students, they come here for the nightlife, which is yeah, not to be repeated, but it's very unique.
Yeah, I was there covering a startup competition between, like 10 European business schools, and it's very interesting to hear that kind of startup energy from these European schools. Well, Tim, tell us a little more as a US student. Why were you kind of looking, toward a MBA program outside of the US, perhaps in Europe, and why specifically ESMT?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you'd asked me 10 years ago or 8 years ago, even 5, even if I'd be here, it would not be the case. But I think that maybe why MBA to start is in terms of I did have a clinical background. So I worked in hospitals, clinics. In 2019, I was promoted. I was like kind of became the manager of a big clinic for stroke and brain injury rehabilitation in Washington, D.C., where I learned a ton about like kind of, again, clinical leadership and that kind of stuff. But I felt like I was really lacking that more formalized training. Like I was looking more for that theoretical understanding, business acumen, organizational management. And so that's what was driving me towards an MBA. And I actually honestly looked first in DC area as I got accepted to Johns Hopkins. I was looking at Wharton. I was looking at all Georgetown, all those schools that were local. And it was kind of, I was looking and I was excited about some of those opportunities, but I'd always had this kind of curiosity about what if or could I look abroad? What does that look like? It also happened to be 2020. So I was, we all felt a little isolated. So I was looking for opportunities, and therefore I started my search. I did not have the chance to study abroad, so I hadn't traveled a whole lot, but I had been to Berlin once, and I started poking around, and I searched top business schools in Europe and specifically in Germany. And so I really wanted to like push myself out of like a comfort zone. I think that having spent 10 years in Washington, D.C., it's a very international environment, but I was looking maybe what would it be like from the other perspective, actually being outside of. And so that, again, that interest was sparked. Then I had these conversations. I applied to 3 schools in Germany. And then of those, ESMT was I was accepted to all and spoke with all. But I think what makes ESMT special on top of what all Marcel has already said is like, I think there's a commitment, and I think Berlin kind of brings it naturally to like a mission driven. I had come from a non-traditional background. I wasn't from a corporate company or consulting, going to an MBA, going back to it. Nothing wrong with those that are, but it was for me something that is invested in like the mission of it. And I think ESMT also does a lot with diversity and a lot with just kind of it's ESG is so big, and like I think sustainability in Berlin's nature is this kind of curiosity and excitement and like openness, and I think ESMT embodies a lot of that kind of culture too. And so I think that even from those first conversations, it was very clear like this was an institution that not only was well spoken for, but also one that had a lot to offer and to grow its students in a way that I was looking for. And it kind of just felt like naturally everything I said, well, if this happens, then I'll do it, and if this happens, then I'll do it. And then here we are. And I moved in 2022 and graduated in 2023 from the MBA program. And
You've been living in Berlin since?
Exactly. So still living in Berlin.
Absolutely. Well, great insight. Thank you. So Marcel, thinking of a student like Tim, perhaps, tell us how ESMT supports international students adapting to life and work in Germany and the broader EU.
Yeah. Just to make sure that we also support national students.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to, first of all, if you look at the employment statistics of MBAs graduating from ESMT, 90%, around 90% stayed in Germany afterwards, with the majority by far out in Berlin. We still have the biggest number of alumni, full-time MBA alumni, but also from MSc programs. People stay in Berlin, and then Munich is a good number 2, and then Frankfurt, and then Stuttgart, where the automotive industry is, and then Hamburg. So first of all, I think also good to know is when you are an international student, especially from outside the EU, and if you get your student visa, that visa allows you to stay 18 months after graduation in Germany, to look for jobs. It's a so-called, a job search visa. And within those 18 months, if you get a job, you can start, you can sign a contract, You can rent a place, you can settle yourself, and in the meantime, over the period of those 18 months, you can apply for a permanent visa and you will get that. So that is one piece of information, but how we support students specifically, in the meantime, we do a couple of things, Tim, we didn't do when you were around. But I think we increased our effort towards the employability of students. So first of all, we created summer options that made the program a little bit longer. Tim was here starting in January and graduating in February. Students are now starting in January, but graduating in early May or late April. And we offer summer options like doing an internship, learning the language, or do a sustainability project. But as soon as the students come in, we assign students to a counselor from the Career Development Center. So you have a fixed person who you will meet a couple of times in a year to discuss your career progress, because basically our goal for the students is that they can make, sustainable career decisions. But for many people, it's so unknown, the German job market or the European job market, how to behave with all the cultural differences. So we also have now a couple of specialists coming in, to speak about that. Second good point is that besides the career counselor, each and every single MBA student gets a career coach who he or she can meet 5 times over the length of the program for 90 minutes, basically discussing, why am I here? Where do I want to go? And how do I actually get there? We also, in the meantime, have some external resources for the students, like a networking platform, a job platform, a platform where they can easily reach out to the counselor to set up appointments. So I think we accommodate the students a lot, but in the end, I also want to say that we are the friends, the counselor, the coaches, but we're not the babysitters, right? I mean, what we try to achieve is that, and that also comes to the profile of a candidate. The students are in the driver's seat, so you need an open and active attitude, to absorb, to learn, to go to meetings, and we provide people with all the information. But in the end, we're not holding their hands. So, it's let that be very, very clear. But I think we offer a lot of tools where the students can profit from. I hope I answered the question.
Oh, you absolutely did. You're talking about some of these one-on-one, resources and meetings, and you guys also have a comparatively smaller MBA cohort than some of the bigger programs. Tell us a little bit about the size of the cohort and the composition.
It differs a little bit per year. 40, 50 students in a class. And that also made me, it could bring me down to the next point if you ask what we do for the students. So there are other schools in Germany also having relatively small cohorts. And a colleague of mine thought, let's call those schools and try if we can do something together. And that ended up in an MBA talent forum in the fall, which is happening at ESMT campus in Berlin, but we have WHU, HHL. WHU is in Düsseldorf, HHL is in Leipzig, and the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management in Frankfurt. They are all joining. So we have those schools bring their also small MBA cohorts to Berlin for a one-day event where companies come, obviously, to network with students, to do panel sessions, and also to have one-on-one speed interview sessions, which all happened on one day. And that is absolutely unique. Never seen that before, and it's an amazing event. And it's cool for the students. It's maybe less cool for the ESMT students because the other people come to Berlin, so they don't travel. But it's a great way to support our students.
Yeah, a lot of great exposure to industry, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So Tim, maybe to some kind of the fun questions. Tell us a little bit more about the experience of studying Berlin, the adjustments both in and outside the classroom.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that the studying part, I guess it seems silly to say, like I wasn't expecting it to be so hard. Not in many ways is a silly one, but I think it's a very intensive, and I think I was blown away in like such a good way. Like the quality of education that I received. I think the curriculum is well designed. It's challenging, and you expect to learn a lot, but I think I even surprised myself in like kind of what I was able to immerse myself in, and I think that was made better because of the cohorts that like myself speaking of. It is small. We were 40. And so I think 40, but from 21 countries. And so I think that richness of thought and experience was like you're surrounded by these like brilliant men and women from all over. And that's a really cool opportunity, I think. And I don't know if this is maybe a ESMT thing or perhaps my cohort specific, but I think the average age also is a little bit older at ESMT versus like some of my friends in the US at some programs. And I think maybe that's my experience, at least when looking at European schools, like our average age was 31 at the time. So I think it says a lot about someone that takes a step. Like for me, I took a break in my career, and so I think that that level of like is an exciting thing, but it also brings a level of like you're committed, and so I think that commitment is brought there, and I think that's why, like Marcel says, we don't need a babysitter because all of us have been working for 10 years, and I think that shows, and I think that kind of relationship is very clear and professional, and it's a really great experience. So inside, you're surrounded by these wonderful people, and then outside, you're in this city that's like so rich with history. And you have so many, it's just the most, again, Berlin is such a wonderful place, I think, for anyone to visit and live in. And so I think it's and you're surrounded by people doing the same, like most are from outside of Germany, at least in our cohort. So therefore we're all kind of struggling together, figuring out how to like deal with different appointments, kind of, learn the new ways of working. We're very privileged still to be in Berlin, which is, as a native English speaker, still pretty, I would say relatively easier, but I didn't expect at like 35 to be learning a new language, but here I am trying and doing my best. And so I think that Berlin offers such a unique experience. And you have these friendships within your cohort that help you learn in the classroom, but also you're figuring things out for yourself outside the classroom as well. So I think that kind of playground, both in and out of the classroom, is one that it's a really rare opportunity, especially after you've been working for a while, to take that break, to fully invest in yourself and to fully get that experience and opportunity.
Yeah, and did you also partake in the nightlife?
No, I feel bad. I'm like such a bad Berliner in some ways because I'm so sleepy all the time. No, I'm much more of a morning person. Like I'm more of like the beer garden and early to drink, early to bed mentality. So maybe I don't fully immerse, but it's there. And I think I would argue Berlin has something for everyone, and that's why I fit in just fine too.
Absolutely. Marcel, if you don't mind, maybe let's go into the weeds a little bit more about how the Career Development Center helps students explore the international and kind of cross-industry opportunities that ESMT may afford.
Yeah, I think I mentioned already a couple of things, I believe. But we just presented last week all the events we have scheduled for the fall. And I can tell you that it's almost fully booked. So what we try and what but that's also our KPI, I wanted to say. So we organize a lot of events with companies, meaning that those companies come on campus at the ESMT where they have a time or exposure to students. That could be a workshop or a case or a company presentation with networking. We also go more and more on site, taking students to companies based in Berlin. That is an easy one because they are pretty close, but we also organize, when Tim was there, I think it was in spring, but now it will happen in the fall. We take the students to Munich, and in the past also to Frankfurt, where we visit companies, locally, because we do have students with an interest moving to the south, to Munich. And also Munich has quite a vibrant startup scene and scale-up scene. So we do that. And we have, I can give a range of examples. Coming Monday, actually, we have a former McKinsey consultant coming in on campus who will practice cases with students the whole day, which is a mixed event with our MSc students, because it's important for both cohorts. Even if you're not focusing on the consulting industry, we notice that you get more and more cases in interviews, even for internships. We noticed that too. So you have to survive the competition and be very prepared. And you know, those exercises, they make it very easy for the students to do so. We also aim to organize networking events with other cohorts, also happening in October. Tim, if you are around in October, be welcome. No, but then, you know,
Great.
we have executive MBAs on campus in residencies. We have part-time MBAs on campus in residencies, and there are a couple of moments in a year where different cohorts are together on campus. So we pick those moments where we bring those classes together. And this upcoming one, is very special because we also launch what we call the mentor maps. We have a mentor-mentee program. Students can sign up for that. Every student at ESMT, you can sign up for it as a mentee, but also as a mentor. And we match people as a mentor and mentee together. And it's, of course, yeah, very interesting. If you are, for example, an American student, you move to Germany and you can have an executive MBA who is a German native, for example, as a mentor. Not only good for the network, but it also broadens your perspective about people and also about, yeah, in this case, then probably the German culture. Yeah, and this is an ongoing thing, you know. So when student close to graduation, we organize another big event, which is our annual career fair. It's always happening early February, where we invite all the students from all ESMT, doesn't matter which program you are, you can come and network with companies. And basically, the overall goal of all those activities and events is to give students a perspective of the opportunities there are, maybe get to know an industry and they never thought about, or a company which they never thought about. And I can guarantee you, looking at the employment figures, that the majority by far out is working at a company they wouldn't think about at the start of the program. And that is, yeah, you know, that is our main goal or our mandate, to have students access to those opportunities.
Absolutely. Tim, from the alumni
Mm.
perspective, what, you know, kind of how did career support influence your path, and any
Yeah.
standout moments for you?
Sure. Yeah, and as you can see, like I think you'd have to work really hard to avoid all the events in terms of like there's something for everyone. I think that's like I think Marcel doesn't give enough justice to the fact that like he's describing all these things and there were only 40 of us and they still did all of these things. Like I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, and I think that it is yours to take and yours to seize and yours to do. So I would say that like again, they put as many that's there and you just have to grab on. So I do think that that part is really wonderful, and I think he alluded to it earlier, but for me, I think anyone that goes to an MBA does expect a level of like career support and like how do you like, you know, mock interviews, those things I think, in which I think ESMT delivers tenfold for sure. But I think what he mentions, and for me, what's so special and helpful is like some of those cultural nuances, like, you know, and kind of how do I change? Like I'm changing careers, I'm changing countries, I'm changing perspective, industry. And so I think that this like duality approach that there is, like I have a career counselor that's helping me with a lot of those logistics on what does a German CV need to look like? What are those kind of things that need to like, what do you need to make sure you include or not include? I think that coupled with the career coach that was mentioned earlier was also, I sometimes called her like a career therapist because I feel like it was like the emotional side of things that I was getting this extra support. Because I do think that for me, and I didn't fully expect that some of the challenges would be like just changing and being somewhere so new and a different culture and trying things out, even though it's not, you know, maybe it's vastly different as other places, but it is still a change. And I think that not only were all these events and things so wonderful, but that just human touch of like being like, here's how you can make this better, and feeling that like cared for, I think is really important. And I think that's something that ESMT, at least in my experience, did really well, because I felt like I always had someone to ask about silly questions like, what does it matter what font I use? And those kind of small things that I think were really special. And again, those little things that make a big difference.
Absolutely. Great. Well, Marcel, switching gears maybe just a little bit, can you talk a little bit about some of the employment, you know, the job market for ESMT MBA graduates, or just MBAs in Germany, especially in, you know, some of the traditional sectors that see in tech, consulting, sustainability, that kind of thing?
Sure. A couple of side notes that the world is pretty upside down, and how do you
What?
say
I don't know what you're talking
that nicely? Restless.
about.
There is a lot going on, and many things also had an effect maybe on, yeah, let's say the recruitment, or that some jobs are maybe less looked for, but with a swift to others. If I don't know if you read the newspaper, but Porsche, take Porsche, has quite some trouble at the moment because of the new tariffs for the United States, the competition from China. So that you know, sometimes all those companies have to reinvent themselves, but it also has an effect on, let's say, the hiring of people in general. There is more competition, and that's all true if you read the news, but companies did not stop hiring talent, right? Coming from an MBA. But there is definitely more competition. So I would say that there is maybe more effort from the student themselves to even start earlier building up relationships and networking. So in general, and I come maybe to the point in a nutshell, you have to keep in mind Germany by itself is a very networking based society. 70% of the jobs are not advertised. Certainly not. The higher you come up, the less jobs you will find advertised. And shooting jobs via LinkedIn doesn't bring very much. So it asks for a lot of research, preparation, networking, building relationships. And we encourage the students to build those relationships as soon as they start the program. Connect with alumni working in industries, you know, create a target list of companies or industries, research the opportunities. Consulting, yeah, still hiring. Technology, absolutely, but there is a little bit of a switch to AI and analytics. There's also the area where you are working in, Tim, healthcare, pharmaceutical, biotech. It's definitely growing. Maybe I would say jobs in sustainability, ESG is more stable at the moment. So, but not impossible. If you look at the numbers of investors and how many billions, you know, they invested this year and last year, then it's super promising that all those startups and scale-ups are definitely hiring. So there are opportunities, but I keep saying that at the moment it's more competitive. And for some jobs, sorry to say, but I also want to be open and honest about it, the German language skills are sometimes quite important. If you deal with local clients, if you do sales or even strategy consulting for German companies, then you need to speak the language.
Interesting. Yeah, I was always, telling when I talk to people about what I do, I was like, the language of business is English, but
Yeah.
that you also have to, if you want to work locally for local companies, like you said, that's an interesting point. And also about the networking culture of Germany. I think that's really interesting.
No, and a lot. Sorry, if I can add a little thing, there are very interesting companies, global organizations, you know, dealing with the whole world, which are sometimes located not in a big city but more remote, and then the language is sometimes even more important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Tim, were you kind of targeting a specific industry or companies when you were, you first started kind of looking for employment during your MBA, or what influenced your strategy? Did you change during the search?
Yeah, for sure. So first I didn't think I was staying in Germany. I thought I would leave after the MBA. So here, first of all, first change was like about 3 months in. I was like, I kind of like it here. So that did shift. But so when I started looking and kind of knowing that was my path, I definitely wanted to stay healthcare adjacent research. I had a background in hospital and healthcare, so I knew I wanted to do something like that. I wanted to get out of patient care. And as Marcel said I wouldn't have been able to unless I was fluent in German, just work in a hospital anyway, but that's not, I was pivoting for a reason. And so I did start looking at a lot of pharmaceutical kind of types of jobs, healthcare, biotech. And I do think that that sector is what kind of I circled. And I think Marcel's point about networking is great. And I think that their team just kept giving me people to talk to, and I did. And it's not easy and it's not comfortable sometimes, but it's especially like, I once showed up to a meeting and then this person was only speaking in German, and that's kind of how I had to learn through. And so I do think there's a level of like vulnerability, and you have to have that eagerness. And I would argue I have nothing but anecdotal evidence, but to say that like while the market is harder, I look at my friends that moved to Germany that on their own without, and then I look at my friends that did the MBA. I think there is something to be said about graduating from a German institution. There's something to be said that having this like support network in that MBA. I do think while it's hard, it's not impossible. I think you just have to work a little harder. And I think one thing that ESMT does also do is it does not only in just Germany, but open you up to Europe. That the E and the ESMT for European, I think is, and I think you have to get more creative. And I think that part is like, this new company I'm working for, I start in a month, is actually Swedish based. So I'm fully remote in Berlin, but working out of a Swedish company. And so I think that you do have to get a little more creative, and it isn't always easy, but I think that's kind of, even early on, they're talking about that. And that's what is helpful at ESMT is like, you can't just think, you're not going to find like a white pages type of thing where you pick it up and like you're going to find this job down the street in Berlin. You have to be really, you have to go at it. And I think that that's very clear from the beginning. And I think that, as Marcel said, those of us that took that advice early on had an easier time at it. It wasn't easy, but easier. And I think that once we get there, and then I have found though that once you're in that market, I know it's always saying easier to get a job once you have a job, but I think that the German market, at least my experience so far, is very true that once you break into it, then you can also show other companies that you have worked in Germany, which then gives a level of validity to it as well. So I see a lot of my cohort members after landing their first job, then that second job, even since we graduated 2.5 years ago, already a step up because they have had that European work experience now that they can put on their CV, and it makes it even easier to get that next position.
Absolutely. How is your language coming?
Oof, I'm learning. I'm learning. It's
How's it going, Tim?
oh my god. No, I think I did actually it's one thing I would also add is when I was in the job search right after graduation, I took 3 months of just intensive German learning. So I do think that also seizing every bit of free time and opportunity to do it is important. I do work in pharmaceuticals, which is primarily, I'm client facing, primarily American facing, so that some of that learning has taken a step back, but my coworkers definitely still challenge me. So I'm getting there. I'm hanging with the 8 and 10-year-olds pretty well, I think, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure I'm ready to lead a corporate meeting yet, but I'll get there.
that's
Yeah.
great.
But that is, if I may, that is exactly the reason
Yeah.
why we changed the program a little bit, offering those summer options. So next to the
Okay.
internship and the sustainability project, we basically send you to a German class. So you have to choose a summer option, right? So if you don't have an internship or a project, then you learn the German, and it's super intense. 6 weeks in a row, you go to class in the morning, you do your homework in the afternoon, and you get your certificate. But it makes a difference, From a personal perspective. I think if you want to live in a you should speak the language of the country you live in. Even if you stay for 1 or 2 years, okay, fair enough. But if you have your life there, it makes it so much easier. And again, if you compete with someone without German and your German is a little bit better, then you might win. So it adds on. It adds on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, can you talk a little bit more, Marcel, about how Berlin specifically kind of adds to that networking and professional development perspective? You mentioned a lot of other, kind of maybe Germany hubs, but what is it about Berlin specifically?
Yeah, where to start? If you are a student, and we are from the Career Development Center, we encourage people to go to events, and you can basically be overwhelmed by the number. And I think Tim mentioned it already a little bit. There is so much going on with meetups, conferences, company events, pitches, investor meetings, that it's hard to choose where to go, because you also have to juggle your curriculum and your exams and your assignments. So there is that is very, very special, I believe, for Berlin, where, yeah, you know, it's a melting pot of investors, policymakers. We are the capital, right? The politics are here as well, and it has an easy, yeah, you know, vibe where you can meet easily entrepreneurs, people starting up a business, incubators, investors. The I cannot find a word for it. I know it in Dutch, but it's a low, you know, it's not, you don't have to step over a big wall, you know, to get to those people. It's quite easy to get there. And in the meantime, I mean, history made Berlin a little bit different than the rest of the country because there were no big headquarters, or the big tech companies would be in the south. But in the meantime, all those organizations, they have representation offices. Startups became scale-ups. There are so many cool big organizations now, you know, settled in Berlin with a lot of opportunities for MBA students, and it's super international. We work a lot with recruiters, of course, and many of those recruiters are also very international. You know, they come from all over the world. And
Yeah.
that's a sign.
Absolutely. Tim, what about you? What about Berlin specifically for, you know, what's the vibe there for you professionally and personally that you maybe not have gotten in another German city?
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, I do think myself, like, we often joke like that Berlin is not Germany in many ways. I think that's like something to be said. But I think it's a very unique place. I think German work culture is something I had to adjust to, and in many ways it's I like. I have way more holidays than I did in the US. I have so
Right.
much more vacation time. And so I think this work-life balance is also something. I mean, I worked like a dog. I worked so hard in DC. I had like 3 jobs working, like, you know, around the clock. And so that work culture is different. And I think Berlin particularly has this vibe to it. Like, I mean, you were just here. You can like feel it. And having lived in Washington, D.C., another capital city, but maybe the other end of the spectrum in terms of Berlin capital city, I think that you have the same opportunities as Marcel mentioned in terms of there's always something going on. But I think there's this general openness and kind of curiosity and thirst and hunger for something different, whereas it's not this competitive landscape maybe that I was used to in the East Coast of the US, but it was one that was just more about like, and it allows you to grow. And I think that professionally and personally, I think oftentimes I wish I could put how much I've grown personally on a CV, because I think that's maybe more of a testament to what I've learned in the last 3.5 years than what I even just learned in a classroom. So I think that Berlin offers this. It's one of those places that you can get nothing out of it or you can get everything out of it. And I think as long as you have that desire to learn and to grow and to be open to new experiences or people, it's hard. You have to work hard to avoid something and avoid that like personal professional growth.
Absolutely. Well, Marcel, now talking about just kind of like the ESMT MBA student, who do you think, what kind of student thrives at ESMT? What are you guys looking for in candidates? What should applicants keep in mind when they're choosing whether or not they should give ESMT a look?
Yeah. Well, I think many of those characteristics you can also already connect to the words we said. You know, if Berlin is an open society, you better be open as well, you know, and don't be afraid to take that second step. So, I mean, you can look at our website and then you can see that we ask for minimum 3 years experience, a bachelor degree, some global exposure, maybe a leadership capabilities. And there is always a personal interview in the end. But I think you need this curiosity, you need this open mind, you need to, yeah, it's such a maybe an empty word, but you really need to be able to step out of your comfort zone, because we know and we've seen the people, and Tim can maybe have seen them in class as well. If you are from a certain country, it's maybe very easy for you to network and to step towards people and to ask for help, and to, you know, ask for insights or a cup of coffee. But we also know that for other people from other cultures, it's not a given, right, that you do that. It's maybe impolite, or it's more a little bit formal. But you should have the confidence I believe that you can really make that step, and then also train yourself, also looking at other people, how they do it, you know, to become a little bit, you know, open for new things, and take initiative. I would say if you are in an admissions process, speak with ESMT alumni, get the contact, you know, and find out how that is. But we also would like to have people in class that are not afraid to speak up, share their minds, give their opinions, disagree with professors, and do not go with the flow necessarily. We all know that one thing, you know, sitting like this behind your computer with your arms like this, it doesn't bring you the job. It doesn't bring you the information you want to have. So yeah, be very active, open-minded. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Reach out to people who will not respond. Don't be afraid of getting a rejection, because each and every single rejection will bring you to a yes.
Yeah.
So you need to be open, you know, to learn and to adapt, yeah, to this.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the MBA classroom, right? That all the
Yeah,
different people kind of in the discussion, and that's where a lot of the learning is taking place.
absolutely. Yeah.
So from you, Tim, then, you know, kind of
Mm.
if you were talking to people who are in that part of the journey where they're, you know, looking at different MBA programs, what kind of advice do you have for those students who may be, you know, considering going outside their home country and looking at a school?
Mhm. Yeah, I think already the fact that someone's looking at investing in themselves is like already a sign of like you've taken the first step of bravery. But I think that for me, if you're willing, and I come from a place of privilege, I understand being able to afford to do it and to take that year off for myself. But if you are in that place and you're open to and even considering it, I say just take the leap. I do think if you've ever considered living abroad, at least I can speak from my experience, of course. There's no, it's not easy by any means, but there's no easier way to do it. Like, I mean, with ESMT support, like you have this community already. So I think that if this is on your mind, like there's no smoother path towards like trying and living in somewhere new in a way that's going to be so well protected and so well insulated and supported. And I think that it's just a great opportunity to learn and to say, like, again, you're going to learn so much. Even if you go for a year and go back to your home country, that's wonderful. But if you want to go somewhere and like you're going to struggle together, you have this community, you have people supporting you along every way, the career, but also some of the visas, things like that. So you're not going to get that opportunity. So I think if you've already considered taking the leap of faith, like investing in yourself for an MBA, you're already like one step there. But if you really want this to change, I mean, ESMT changed my like world in many ways, because I would have never thought I'd be here. And I think that there's no safer place to do it, and there's no like way you're not going to fail if you have like this great support around you. So I think if you're considering it, it's definitely a leap of faith, but one there's a net a little bit around ESMT at least to help you kind of guide you there. So they're not going to let you fall.
Absolutely. Well, one last question for both of you, kind of maybe a little bit more, just more for fun. What would be a word that you would describe the MBA experience at ESMT? You know, maybe a phrase or word that you think sums it up. Tim, go ahead.
Sure. I think, I mean, hopefully it's been clear, but I would say the word I would use is like an adventure, if I would say, in many ways. I think that it doesn't come without challenges. There are ups, there's downs, there's easy parts, there's harder parts. But I'd say that ESMT as a whole, it's like, again, it was a life-changing experience for me in many ways. It kind of set me on a new path that I didn't think I'd go down. And I have that to thank. And so I think, again, every day, sometimes even the smallest things, I think when, again, learning to moving from a new place, like even finding out where do you buy like a light bulb or how do you schedule appointments, all those little things that I took for granted, especially working in healthcare. I felt very vulnerable now, but I think that you learn so much. I grew so much more personally than I thought I would just by taking this leap of faith, for sure.
Absolutely. Marcel, anything?
Well, thank you. I had more time to think.
Yeah.
The word, to look for the word. I would say transformation. I think it changed so many people's lives.
Mm.
I think people came out with a bigger network, with new insights. Yeah, a new purpose. you know, I would say it's a one life opportunity where this transformation really happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, both of you, thank you so much. If you could just take one last seconds to kind of tell us the best way to get in touch with you, if people want to learn more. Marcel, the
Yeah, for me, very simple. I'm on LinkedIn. I think there is only one person with my first and last name that together in the whole
wow.
LinkedIn. Yeah. So easy to find, but you can always reach out to me. Happy to take questions or guide you further to admissions colleagues or alumni or who else. Yeah.
Yeah. Tim, what did you find most helpful when you were researching?
I spoke to 2 alumni as well, which was helpful. So I think that I think for me, again, obviously, because if you speak to people at school, no offense, Marcel, you're going to get like a story with a pitch of what, but you really have to talk to someone. I think that lived
Yeah.
it, and I think for me, that's what you need, and I'm happy to be there. So LinkedIn is always for me, and I know my experience is unique, of course, maybe it's hopefully someone that's listening, but I also have 40 people that all came from 40 different careers that I know pretty well. So I think that there's if Marcel can't match, I can't match. There's always someone to talk to, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both again for your time and joining us. That wraps up our discussion for today. But as always, we have a lot more of these information on ESMT Berlin and other top European schools on our website and our YouTube channel. And thanks all the viewers for tuning in. And until next time, thanks very much.